Well, good morning. Remember that butternut squash that I had, and I cooked it and I froze it, and it was a little bit longer than this, and it was about, I would say about, it was about 5 to 6 cups, probably more, but it was a little bit larger than this. I had baked it and I had scooped out the pulp, and then I froze it. So I froze it, and then I thawed it, and I decided to make some butternut squash tamales. So I am making butternut squash tamales. Good morning. Yes, we're still on the lockdown of the coronavirus. So I thought, well, let me make some tamales. I had promised a friend that I would be making tamales for her. And I kind of was, in my mind, I was thinking, well, I can mix the butternut squash with the pumpkin. But then I thought, and then after cooking the butternut squash, which was a little bit larger than this one that I got at the farmer's market for just $1, I scooped out all the, after it was cooked, after I cooked it in the oven with a little bit of water on a shallow pan, and I covered it, and I stuck it in the oven, and I cooked it until it became tender. And let's say about, I would say about 45 minutes maybe, and added degrees of 375, 400, until it's very tender. You can poke it with a fork, and if your fork can easily go in there in the butternut squash, then it's done, basically. And so I took it out, and you can leave it a little bit caramelized, and it'll give it a little bit of that smoky flavor. So, but I didn't, and I went ahead and I scooped it out and put it in a bag after it cooled down, and stuck it in the freezer, and I unthawed it. And now what I'm going to do is make a butternut squash tamale. And I've done them before, and I actually used the butternut squash soup, which is essentially the same thing, but you get more of that little flavor when you make them fresh. There's just something about making a butternut squash tamale that is fresh. So, so basically what I did was I added some of my masas. And so I have two kinds of masas. I have a white masa, and then I have this organic masa that I find in masa, a little bit of masa, and I do half and half. I do half that and half that, and I basically have the equal amounts of the butternut squash and the masa. And then what I did was I mixed it, but then that didn't stop there. I needed to add some stock to make it a little bit more pliable. So I added some stock into the masa. And then I wanted to make it flavorful. So I added some umamis in there. You can add basically some any kind of flavorful, because you have to flavor up the masa. It needs some salt, otherwise it's going to be bland. And then I added a little bit of the fire roasted green chilies, and I added a little bit of the salsa verde, and of course you have to add the baking powder, and you have to add the baking soda. And it doesn't stop there. So what I was having a challenge, of what kind of fats to use. So because of the coronavirus, this stood out to me because it was the only one left. I was looking for butter. They didn't have any butter, so what I did was this challenge stood out. And usually when I make my vegetarian masas, I use a mixture with a butter and a little bit of oil. So this already has it in it, so that's why it's spreadable. So I said, this is so perfect. So I put that in there, and now I'm mixing it up. My battery's low, so I'm going to have to close this one off, and then I'll get you on part 2.